Hello there everyone, and welcome to my very first Lightroom tutorial. In this one I'm going to be using Adobe Lightroom 6.5 I believe, and I'm basically just going to be showing you how to do a very nice retouching to your portraits. As you can see here, I have one of each of the photo. I have the original, which looks pretty plain and boring, and then I have the enhanced portrait that I did. It's a lot more striking, the image itself pops out a lot. It's just a simple black and white portrait, but I will walk you through all the things that you can do to make your portraits look a lot more professional like this and look better. So let's go ahead and start with the original. Go ahead and open Develop if you haven't already opened it, or the Develop tab, excuse me. So now here we have all the basic settings that we need to retouch the photo. I'm not going to be using everything. In fact, I'm only using quite a few things. Well, a small portion of things. You'll see. So the first thing we want to do is we want to go ahead and bring down the highlights all the way to -100. And I'm going to push the shadows all the way to 100. So this common dynamic, I guess you would call it, technique is used very commonly in HDR photos and just the HDR technique itself. It's not really a technique that I want to use in this particular photo. Because if you see, it kind of becomes too much if I push the clarity all the way up, and I don't know, it looks fake and I don't really like it. I'd rather go by hand and pull out the shadows and highlights of the face and the clarity on some parts. So we're going to leave that back there, but I do like the negative highlights and the boosting the shadows because it kind of makes the image pop better. I mean, you don't really get as much darkness and you kind of see more of the face. So that's always the first thing I like to do. Then the next thing I like to do is I like to alter the blacks and the whites. So we're going to take the whites, and holding the Alt key, I'm going to drag it to the right until I start to see the image pop through, just like that. So I'm going to pull it back just a little ways, like right there. Boom, release. So now we can see the whites have kind of been pushed, but not too much. And we're going to kind of do the same to the blacks as we did to the highlights. We're going to pull the blacks down. Holding the Alt key, you're going to pull left until you start to see the image burn through, and I want just a little bit like that. There we go. So it's not too much. Oh, I guess I didn't even really. So for this particular portrait, I think I'm going to leave it at about -7. Yeah, that looks fine. All right, so coming down to the clarity. As I said, portraits, I really don't use the clarity that much. However, for this portrait, I'm going to push the clarity just until I think it looks good. Not too much. It's really easy to kind of overkill it with clarity. So again, just do it to what looks good to your eye and just kind of drag it to the right very slowly. I'd say no more than 45. I'd say that looks plenty. Because I'm going to do a black and white, I'm not going to mess with the vibrance or the saturation. We're going to avoid the tone curve, the color box, the split toning box, and we will come right down here to the detail. Now, I make my portraits pretty simply, mainly because I don't do a lot of noise reduction. I don't really go crazy with the settings and the sharpening. It's kind of just a 3-step simple sharpening thing that I do. And it kind of goes like this. So first, I take the sharpening and I pull it all the way up. So everything in the image is fully sharpened. And then what I do is I hold the Alt key and I kind of drag up the masking to really pinpoint exactly what I want sharpened in the image. Right about there looks good. As you can see, most of the subject, if not all the subject, really is sharpened, and the background is left untouched, which is good. Yeah, so that looks good. Now, I don't think I need the image this sharpened. It's just kind of just to get an idea for masking. So we can go ahead and pull the sharpening down just a little bit. I don't want to do it too much, but just enough to where it's, yeah, okay, I'd say right there is good, 1 of 5. Okay, so as I said, we're not going to mess with noise reduction or any of this. 2 other things left for the basic retouching of this picture. We're going to go to lens correction, and we're going to enable profile corrections, and we're going to remove chromatic aberration. All right, so last thing I'm going to do for the basic retouching is basically just add a vignette, and I think I'm going to pull it down right about, I think I like -17. Let's try -17. There we go. So that's what I had on the original photo, and I think that's perfect for portraits. No more than that, but it's enough to where it kind of pulls your attention to the face. So once that's done, I think I want to pull the exposure down just a little bit. And by the way, I shot this in RAW, and it's really important to shoot in RAW, just so you can have full editing control in Lightroom when it comes to photography, of course. I think that looks good. I don't know. I guess we could leave it at 0. I guess it's not that bad. So for now, let's go ahead and put a black and white filter on it. All right, so we kind of got the basic retouching done. But as you can see, if you look at the other photo, there's still more of a pop to it. You can kind of see the shadows and highlights are stronger. See, as I move forward and back and forth, it looks, the other one just looks a little bit better. So now this is where the doing things by hand comes into play. So the first thing I like to do when it comes to actually manually retouching is I like to draw attention to the center point of a portrait. Now, for any portrait, to me, the strongest point is always the eyes, because that's where your eyes are going to go first. So we want to make the eyes kind of pull through a little bit more. So we're gonna open up the radial tool, and basically we're just going to draw circles, or ovals, I should say, around the eyes like this. I like to put my feathering all the way up. And of course, you know, you're not going to bring the exposure because that looks weird. But what you will do is you'll go over to the clarity and you'll pull the clarity all the way up. What this does is kind of makes the gloss of the eyes really intense. And to me, I love the look of this just solely on the eyes itself. It really makes the image, it kind of brings the portrait to life, in my opinion. There we go. I don't want it too big, but I don't want it too small. Okay, so I'd say that looks good. Already you can tell it's kind of a lot more glossier and shiny, and it kind of just pulls your eyes towards that area of the face, and I like that personally. You don't have to do it on your image, but it's just a technique I like to do. So now the next thing we want to do, we want to add a little bit of clarity to the face, like parts of the hair, a little bit of the mustache. And you kind of want to be careful because adding clarity can actually darken parts of the image, which, you know, it's just a thing you got to deal with. So I'm not going to do it a whole lot of clarity. I think I'll go up to maybe 15. Well, actually, a trick I like to do is do 100, and then we'll just get the whole eyebrow, and then we'll see what that does. Oh, well, okay. So in this case, something to try is going to negative 100 because it kind of brightens up the hair a little bit. I've actually really never done this before. I've always done like just a little bit of clarity. So this is kind of new for me that you guys are learning on camera. I actually think that looks pretty good. Alrighty. So I'm kind of liking how that's looking. Definitely. Okay, so again, it's just minor clarity on parts of the facial hair. If your subject has a beard, you can go through and do it with the beard. You could add sharpness or clarity, or you could pull back the clarity and kind of do what I did. The reason I pulled back the clarity on this portrait is definitely to kind of show more light in the hair, because the hair itself is already so dark. So it really works and it makes it stand out. So the last thing I'm going to be doing for retouching is basically the shadowing and highlighting. And we're going to double click on this slider to bring it back down to 0. So for that, I like to use an adjustment brush. Oh, whoops, sorry. And then I go to exposure, and we're going to do the highlights first. Actually, no, let's do the shadows first. So are you ready for my magic setting? Here it is. So for me, the perfect setting I found for shadows and highlights is basically 0.23. That is negative and positive. So for highlights, I'll put it at 0.23. For shadows, it's negative 0.23. I don't know why, but just I think that this particular setting just happens to do the best. So then what we want to do is we want to go through all the shadows of his face and kind of just bring them out more. So we'll start with the nose. We kind of just drag up, and we kind of get parts of the forehead, especially all like right here. And just kind of enough to where it kind of blends in. You kind of want to be careful with the eyes. I mean, you don't want them to look like Emperor Palpatine and have those sunken and dead looking eyes. That's something you kind of got to be careful of when you're doing this. Now, obviously, when doing this, you're going to really, really take your time and kind of get every detail. I'm just kind of doing a general shadowing, like nothing too intense, just for the sake of the tutorial. Whoops. Let's see, and then we'll get the creases of the chin here. And as you can see, the negative 23 is just enough to where it kind of brings some shadow, and it kind of makes the shadow pull out more, but not enough to where it's fake and overly drastic. So especially like the neck shadow right here. In the original picture I showed you, the retouched one, I even did the ones on his shirt, but I'm not going to do it in this picture. You can do a little bit up here, maybe inside the ear a little bit. Okay, so that looks pretty good. So the next thing we want to do is definitely the highlights now. So we'll go ahead and hit new, and then we'll bring this up to positive 23. Okay, and then we'll go ahead and we'll get the nose portion, kind of just adding highlights back into the cheeks, the forehead, and again, you want to be really meticulous. Obviously, I'm not taking my time a whole lot just because it's a tutorial, and I'm not going to make you sit here for 30 minutes and watch me do every little detail, but this is just so you kind of get the idea of what to do. I mean, it's not that hard. You're literally just tracing the shadows and highlights of the face. That's all you're doing and kind of filling in. Now, already that looks so much better. And as you can see, compared to the original, they almost look identical now. Obviously, I did a bit more extensive retouching on this particular portrait, but as you can see here in the navigator, as I go through between, that's pretty much it. Obviously, there's some shadow highlighting done on the shirt and his hand, but I'm not really going to go over that in this tutorial because it's the exact same thing I'm doing on his face. Just kind of go over the shadows and highlights that are already there. And so yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. That is how to get a nice professional black and white portrait. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and if you like what you see, you can go ahead and subscribe and like, and I'll have more tutorials up for you. Thanks, guys. See ya.